Si quieres ver el mismo video en español, albo po polsku, or in other languages, mira la descripción abajo. Today we're going to talk, as usual, about languages, a bit of history, and today we're at a new ingredient, economics. I've seen many language rankings in terms of the number of the native speakers or the number of the people who learn a given language as their second language. But today I'm going to show you a list of languages in terms of influence or power. We're going to see the ranking of 20 most influential languages in the world. But now, how should we define the most influential language? Is it the language the world's strongest army communicates in? Or perhaps the language with most catchy songs? Or perhaps it is the language in which most cheese is produced?
Cheese.
This question is tough, difficult to define, but for sure we can assume two things. A language is more powerful the more people speak it as their native tongue. The language is more powerful the more affluent the common native speaker of the language. For example, Sweden and Azerbaijan have similar populations, but the average Swede is much richer than the average Azerbaijani, and consequently, Swedish is more powerful or influential. This materialistic measure makes sense because in the same conditions, the more people earn, the more time and obviously money they have for spending for things such as modernizing the army, composing catchy songs, or producing cheese. Now, we would need an indicator that would take these two assumptions into account, and at the same time, it would be cool if this indicator had values readily available for every single country in the world. It turns out that such indicators exist. We will consider the one beloved by the economists and politicians.
It's the economy, stupid.
We'll have a look at the gross domestic product. Gross domestic product is an indicator of the production of goods of a country per unit of time, usually 1 year. GDP is generally expressed in dollars, and it will be the same in this ranking. All transactions in the economy of a given country count towards GDP. Today, all governments are crazy about this indicator. Now, with this indicator, we can finally move on to languages. We can group the countries by language used by the majority of the citizens. Then count the GDP of these groups and voila! With this, we are ready to start. Obviously, English is on this list and actually quite high. The main language of Bangladesh. But Bengali is also spoken in India. Bangladesh is a very peculiar country. It is a country with an area equal to the state of New York, but with a huge population of 160 million people, which is around half of the population of the United States. Farsi is the language of the ancient Persia, now present-day Iran. Farsi used to be a prestigious language of aristocracy in many countries, states, and empires. We can experience that when we start learning foreign languages such as Hindi, Arabic, or Turkish. They're full of Persian loanwords. Vietnamese is the first of the tonal languages in this list. We talked about tonal languages in one of the previous videos. Thai is the language used by people who live in Thailand. It is the only country in the Southeast Asia that has never been colonized by any European power. Thailand functioned as a kind of a buffer between the British colonial empire and French colonial empire. Thai is the second of the three tonal languages in this list. Polish is one of the two Slavic languages in this ranking. It is a language with a rich literary history. Polish is surprisingly homogeneous, given the problems that Poland has gone through in recent centuries. The language of the country which has been at the forefront in many fields since the 15th century: painting, science, and commerce. Today, technology and media companies. The Netherlands were also powerful in colonization. The fourth largest country in terms of population was until recently a Dutch colony. In this ranking, I considered only the GDP of South Korea because it was quite difficult to find reliable data on this other Korean. Korean language is a success story. A language used by a relatively small population. However, thanks to its engineering products and culture, Korean has become recently very fashionable. Turkish is the heir of the Ottoman Empire. The golden age of the Turkish language began with the conquest of Constantinople by the troops of Mehmed II and ended once and for all with the First World War. Italian is the language of the past and the Renaissance. Italian is still a king in one important domain, namely music. You can still read it everywhere in music sheets. French throughout the ages was widespread thanks to its great export products. French is probably the most underranked language in this list because I have not included the GDPs of lots of African countries in which French is a very important language of education and culture, but I did not include their GDP because in none of these countries French is a language spoken at home by the majority of the population. Portuguese was initially spoken only in the Little Portugal. But since Portuguese were the first in the colonization race, also de Españas. Today, Portuguese is a very influential language and is the primary language of the countries much larger than Portugal, Brazil, and Mozambique. A bit controversial topic, but these two languages are super similar. They are spoken mainly in Malaysia and Indonesia. Due to politics, they are considered as two separate languages, even though both Malaysians and Indonesians can communicate with each other without much trouble. Indonesia is one of the countries that did not succumb to the influence of the colonizer, in this case, the Netherlands. And today in Indonesia, no one speaks Dutch. Like Korean and Vietnamese, Japanese was heavily influenced by Chinese language. Vietnamese and Korean, either thanks to the colonizers or thanks to the ingenious inventors, today have much more simplified writing compared to Chinese. But the same is very difficult to say for Japanese, although the Japanese also tried. Today, Japanese is a strange mixture of Latin alphabet, Chinese characters, and strange homemade syllabaries. In this language I have included the population of, obviously, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan, because in all these countries, majority of population speaks Russian fluently. The strong export of the Russian language took place predominantly during the 20th century, when Russia was one of the two political centers of the world. But Russia influenced its neighboring countries even long before that. It was always influential in the European history. In the late 19th and in the beginning of 20th century, it was the language of science. Today, German is still a popular language to learn due to prosperity and development of the German-speaking countries. Arabs began to spread rapidly in the 7th century. Today we have a lot of countries in the world where Arabic is the main language. We all assume that all Arab countries speak the same language, Arabic. Although the difference between some dialects, such as Moroccan Arabic and Saudi Arabic, might be greater than the difference between Spanish and Portuguese, which here are listed as two separate languages. Spanish, together with Portuguese, managed to supplant almost all languages in South America, but was unable to do it in its own country. Today in Spain there are several strong languages, not only Spanish, but also Catalan, with the capital in Barcelona, or Basque language in the Basque country. These two languages, even though very similar, are considered to be two separate languages. Hindi is spoken in India, while Urdu is spoken mainly in Pakistan. Today, both languages differ visibly. For example, Urdu is written with this script, and Hindi is written with this script. So Urdu script derives from Arabic script, while Hindi script derives from Sanskrit. Nevertheless, both languages are very similar, and this can be appreciated when both Urdu speakers and Hindi speakers start to watch Bollywood movies. And they understand them without subtitles and without dubbing. Chinese. For now, this is the only competitor that can dethrone the leader of this ranking. Chinese uses one of the oldest writing systems in the world, which makes it terribly complicated. But truth to be told, there are many myths about Chinese writing. Some of them I debunk in another video. You can find it below. English was exported by Great Britain for years. In the 20th century, this obligation was inherited by the United States, which today floods us heavily with its culture. Tech, TV, music, diet. Never has such a large percentage of the world's population been that crazy about learning one single foreign language: English. English is used as mother tongue by this number of people. Even though English is the winner of this ranking, it is still underranked, just like French, because I didn't include lots of people who speak English as their second language, many times fluently. That's it. Take all this classification with a grain of salt. For me, it was just a great excuse to talk about 20 big, popular languages and a bit of economics. If you think I could have used a better method for ranking the world's most influential languages, leave me a comment below. And for sure I could, as GDP has lots of flaws. I might revisit the topic of economics and languages in this channel in the future. Right now, I'm working on a video related to languages, of course, where I will describe the grammar of a very famous character from a science fiction movie. Below is the link to my GitHub, where you'll find the script that I used for calculating the GDP of languages. Below you can also find my other videos, links to social media, tools and methods for learning languages. This would be it for today, and see you soon.